Welcome back, and in this module we're going to talk about why leaders fail. And this is a question that's been asked to me in many of my leadership masterclass, in many of my programs. Why do leaders fail? Which is the question that many people want to know, the leadership derailer. So let's do this topic about leadership derailer. And if you look at over the last 25 years, because of the, as we talk about the change in the business environment, the VUCA world as it is today, there are many leaders who fail to be able to adapt and move towards this new normal. Now, in my executive coaching, in developing the C-suite leaders, looking at some of these future leaders, as I coach them and understand why they fail, and very sad, most of the time when I've been called upon to provide support for this leader, is because they are unable to demonstrate effective leadership in one form or another. And I look at, as I said, over a 20 years period, some of the coaching engagements that I have, more challenging coaching engagement, and there are some certain observations and backed by research by Center for Creative Leadership, research by Executive Development Associate EDA, and many other, my work at, well, I was in Mercer, Hay Group, and DBM and Forum. Let me just share with you 8 critical lessons that we can learn on leadership derailer, or the why leaders fail. Now, basically these are the 8 leaders. Let me just start with the first one: failure to develop or demonstrate this competency, what we call think strategically and articulate a vision. And a good example, thinking strategically and articulating a vision is important. And I mentioned this before in the VUCA world, as General George Casey has mentioned, that you need to have a compelling vision, articulate clearly. And Jack Welch, in his book, many of his books, he clearly talk about a great business leader need to be able to create a vision, articulate the vision, passionately own the vision, and then relentlessly drive it to completion. So how do you do that? Now, many people fail because they have a great vision, but they're not able to articulate, or they're not able to drive it to success. Having great vision is not good enough. Having articulated it is not good enough, but how do you lead, inspire your team to achieve that goal? That's important. That's what great leaders are. So that's number 1. Number 2, failure to adopt or demonstrate what we call cross-cultural diversity and communication. In the world that we live today, if you look at whether in Asia Pacific or globally in Europe, or if you look at within the in Africa, for example, as well. So you have diverse culture across each continent. And how do you learn, unlearn, relearn? We should talk about learning agility of those practices to be able to develop the ability to communicate and develop the collaborative approaches in those markets that you are targeting. And that is second derailer, inability to develop cross-cultural diversity and communication effectively in those markets. Third is about inability to develop strategic alliances and partnership. You know, if you look at IBM back in the 70s, the 80s, they are the mighty IBM, the big blue, where they decide to go all on their own. And they are the mighty IBM, doesn't need anybody else. But today, IBM is an organization that has multiple hundreds of alliances, partnership with organizations to bring about value for their customer. They're no longer alone, and IBM is no longer a hardware company, it is a service organization that dependent on others to deliver value for the customer. So strategic alliances and partnerships is very critical. A good example is also AOL. Time Warner. Now, Steve Case, who was the founder of AOL, and one stage says that strategic alliances and partnership were critical for the organization when they first formed, and also when they were part of AOL Time Warner. And the lesson here is you cannot go alone. No organization, or no man is an island, no organization can work alone. You need to learn to collaborate and work with others. And that also is part of the LEAP competency that we talk about in leading in the VUCA world. Is the last P, partnership, is where we found it very critical. So this failure to develop partnership, collaborative, is critical to be addressed in the VUCA world. Next is the inability to develop a team of co-leaders. Now, what do I mean by co-leaders? Co-leaders are individuals. We traditionally see them as direct report. At CEE, we believe these are individuals that work with you to drive your strategy, your vision. You should treat them as your peers, co-leaders, who would share your belief. That is, you need to inspire them, to help them to see and have the shared vision to drive the audience to success. That reminds me of a quote by Warren Bennis. Warren Bennis was the Hemingway of leadership. As you know, Warren Bennis is the guru of leadership. He has passed on since many years ago. But one thing he says, that the best thing a leader can do for a great group is to allow its members, the co-leaders, to discover their greatness. So your role as a leader is to help to develop these co-leaders, inspire them, develop them, coach, guide them to be able to excel. So one of the derailer here is inability of leaders to develop their co-leaders. That brings me to the next derailer, what we call the learning agility. What makes leaders who fail, when I ask them, when they move from one role to another, or one organization to another, and when I ask them what makes them inability to adapt, is what we call the learning agility. So they do not have the ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn. And if you remember the book Future Shock by Alvin Toffler, and he clearly articulates and says that the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read or write, but it will be those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. Those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. And that is very important. How do you develop that speed of learning? And that itself is a source of competitive advantage. An organization like GE, organization like Johnson & Johnson, Boeing, these are learning organizations that thrives on providing the opportunity for their leaders to develop the skill on how to be ready for the future. And if you look at many leaders who fail, when I ask them, is that they're not able to learn quick enough, fast enough, to be able to provide that necessary support, transformation in the organization. So one of the derailer is inability to learn, unlearn, and relearn fast enough to be able to transform your organization. The other derailer that we have seen in a lot of our coaching engagement that we have found is that many of these leaders who fail come to us and say, look, they adopt one or two particular style of leadership that they're very comfortable with, and they stick to the same style all the time. So the derailer here is the inability to adopt a repertoire of leadership style to allow you to be ready to use different style if situation warrants it. And a good example, I can tell you a story now of a CEO that I know that I'm coaching in Malaysia. Highly affiliated, well liked by the staff, but when the global financial crisis in 2008-2009 came, he was not able to adopt the necessary measures to turn around the organization, take drastic measures to implement tough policy because he's too close and he finds it difficult to convey those tough messages. And worse still, the people that has been with him over the years, because of the strong rapport that he has built, and it creates a false sense of this closeness with the leader, that as the saying goes, familiarity breeds contempt. They don't respect him, they don't listen to him when he's trying to convey the message that you need to change, you need to transform, we need to implement tough policies to bring about a shift in the business practices or human resource practices within the organization. Is not been accepted. So that brings the message that Daniel Goleman is a book called Primal Leadership, or the article called Leadership That Gets Results in the Harvard Business Review in 2000. And Daniel Goleman says that the best leader don't know just one style of leadership. They are skilled at several, and they have the flexibility to switch between style as the circumstances dictate. So what he means is that you need to be flexible. You need to be able to know when do we switch our style. How do we then develop the right style of leadership as the situation warrants it? Now that is the derailer that we talk about, inability to switch or adopt a repertoire of leadership style. And next derailer is the inability to adopt what we call an employee first centric culture. Many organizations today, still believe that, we have the customer first. Now, unfortunately, the mantra need to be examined. The customer first mantra has worked for many organizations, but today we need to ask this question: does it hold true in the VUCA world? You're dealing with knowledge-based worker, knowledge-based employee, dealing with the Gen Y, millennial, the Gen X, the Gen Z that's coming on board. How are you going to be ready? A good example is Virgin Group. Virgin Group, Richard Branson has, the flamboyant, extraordinary entrepreneur. And he has this philosophy that put your staff first, customer second, and shareholder third. Now that is a very wise philosophy, because you take care of your staff, they will deliver great customer experiences which allow your customers to be satisfied, delighted, who will then become your ambassador to other customers, who will come and create that long-term sustainable customer base, which leads to results for your organization. So I think that makes us employee first centric. So leaders who are not able to put staff first, leaders are not able to practice this mantra, fail in the long term, because they need to always remember to take care of the staff who will take care of the customers. And last but not least, this is the most important in my experience in a lot of coaching. People always ask me, what makes a great leader? And I think this is where my advice to all of you: always remember to manage your boss, manage upwards. Now, if you are a manager, manage your head of department. If you're head of department, manage, or head of function, manage your CEO. If you are the CEO, manage your board, chairman and the board member. It's very important to understand managing upwards is a very important element that is missing in a lot of leaders. They may be seen to be negative. People always say, it's not me, I find it difficult. If I were to manage my boss, it's like carrying favors and so forth. But it's important. Know your boss' expectation. Know how he wants to communicate. Knows what is important to him. How can you support him? How can you add value? And what is it that he needs to be done? What is it that you can contribute? Now that's very important. Work with your boss, especially if your first 90 days. Your first 90 days in a new role, new organization. Ask this important question: what do my boss wants from me, expect from me? How can I support my boss in a much better way? What does he need from me? If you're able to understand that, you're able to provide that support, that would provide a good working relationship with your boss, with your board. If you're a CEO, that will steer you to success. Now, those who fail, and regrettably, many of those that I've met in many organizations, many CEOs or C-suite leaders that I coach, this is common. They find they're struggling on trying to build rapport and manage their boss. Now, so let me just conclude. the leadership derailer that we have spoke about, the 8 leadership derailer, is important to be able to understand that these are areas that has proven to be fatal for some leaders who have been fired the first 90 days, leaders who has been removed, because these are the 8 competencies, skills they need to develop. Let me just repeat them before I conclude. Number 1, they need to think. Those who fail to think strategically and articulate vision, those who fail to have cross-cultural diversity and communication, those who fail to build strategic alliances and partnerships, those who fail to build a team of co-leaders to support their vision, those who fail to develop learning agility, learn, unlearn and relearn, the set of competencies that is very critical for the future in the VUCA world, those who fail to adopt and demonstrate a repertoire of leadership style, and those who fail to adopt an employee-first customer-centric culture where they take care of the employee, who deliver great experience, take care of the customer, and lastly, those who fail to manage upwards, basically manage a boss. If you follow this advice, look at all this, and if you are the first 90 days, if you're working on a new organization, new role within the organization, you've been promoted, examine this. These are the guidelines, my recommendation, that you need to look at this and ask yourself, what am I going to do to be able to prepare? So with that note, remember the SMART Leadership Action Plan. Look at this derailer. What are you, where you are, what are the gaps that you are facing? What do you need to do? What support do you need? How do you, when are you going to do it? And at CE, we have the stakeholder mapping as part of our coaching plan. If you need to know more information, get back to us. Communicate to us by social media. We have programs to help you, to support you on that. With that note, I wish to thank you and look forward to seeing you on our next program. Bye.